Go to hell. It's over. You shall die.
If you want to get more closely acquainted with Vergil's doppelganger mechanic, I strongly encourage you to watch my first video, which is basically this doppelganger guide, where I go very in-depth into the basics, the rudimentary aspects of this mechanic. The link for that video will be in the description below, so yeah. So first things first, before I start talking about the combo and the mistakes you can make and all that jazz, I should preface this by talking about my controls. So, I play this game using my mouse and keyboard. Yeah, really. Blasphemy, I know. But I think that if you've ever played a single game on your PC using a mouse and a keyboard, these controls should be familiar to you. I think they're very easy to grasp. So, just like with almost every game ever, WASD are the keys you use for movement. So W is forward, S is backwards, A is left, D is right. This is the equivalent to you using your analog stick for moving, like tilting it left, right, forward, backward. That's basically what I use. So again, W forward, S backward, A left, D right. Obviously, just like in every game ever, space is jump, so I jump using space. The left mouse button, unsurprisingly, is the attack button, also like in every game ever. The right mouse button is the button I use for Mirage Blades, so all my Mirage Blade attacks are mapped to the right button, the right mouse button, I mean. So that's basically it for these basic controls. Shift is the button I use for locking on. So when I lock on, I press Shift. In this game, you gotta be locked on for just about any attack ever. Only under specific circumstances should you release the lock on. But yeah, basically lock on is Shift in my case. So next up we've got the trick action. So, trick up, down, air trick, all that stuff. I use E. So E is the button I use. So if I press E without locking on, that is trick up. If I press E while locking on, like Shift plus E, that is air trick, and I teleport. If I press back to forward plus E, or S plus W plus E, that is trick down. So, like I said, E is the trick action. That's the button I use for tricking, basically. R is the button I use for taunting. So that's the taunt button. Air taunts, lock-on taunts, doesn't matter. R is the button you gotta press for taunting. Moving on, I have F, and F is the button I use to charge my Sin Double trigger. So I press and hold F, then I release it, and I basically go into my Sin Double trigger mode. Moving on, we also have 1 and 2. So 1 is the button for changing the weapon to the right. So my layout is as follows. I use the default layout for my weapons, my arsenal. So it goes Yamato, Beowulf, Mirage Edge. So if I have the Yamato equipped and I press 1, it will switch to Beowulf, which is the weapon to its right. And if I press 1 again, it will switch from Beowulf to the Mirage Edge, which is the weapon to its right. If I have the Yamato equipped, and I press 2, it will go to the weapon that's on its left, and that is the Mirage Edge. If I press 2 again, it will switch to Beowulf. If I press 2 again, it will once again switch to the Yamato. So that's how this works. It's for switching weapons left and right. That's how it works. Moving on, we have the doppelganger buttons. So the buttons are as follows. X is the slow doppelganger. This is a doppelganger that is kind of delayed by about, I don't know, half a second or something. So that's X. C is the normal doppelganger. He is slightly delayed, not by half a second, but like he's just not completely in sync with you. So that's C. And V is the haste version of the doppelganger who is completely in sync with you, meaning that he immediately reacts to your commands and he mimics your inputs. He registers them immediately and simply reacts to them. So, yeah. I deactivate the doppelganger by pressing Z. So that's how I do it. And, you know, that's pretty much... those are all the controls, really. There are some other things like, you know, using CTRL to basically lock on to multiple targets, or, I mean, switch the lock on, stuff like that, or using the arrows, using, you know, it just doesn't matter, really. These are the main things that you will need. So, if I say, I'm pressing D plus left mouse button, that means that I'm pressing right plus attack button. If I say I'm pressing S plus W plus left mouse button, that means I'm pressing back to forward plus attack button. Kind of like tilting your analog stick back and then forward and then pressing the attack button. So that's how it works. If I say back to forward plus right mouse button, or S plus W plus right mouse button, that is basically back to forward plus your Mirage Blade button. So heavy rain blades in my case. But don't worry, most of the time, like 99% of the time, I'll say right plus attack button instead of D plus left mouse button, because I feel like that's more universally comprehensible, if you know what I mean. So, yeah, these are my controls, and now let's talk about the actual combo. So now we got the blood combo, which I did in this Bloody Palace. It's a mod called Bloodier Palace or something. So this combo is a mix between one of Connie Mio's combos, that's like the first half, and the second half is from one of OF's combos, so this one. So it's kind of like a mixture, again. And for this combo, you need to be in your Sin DT all the time, and you need to have the Blistering Blades active. You need to basically, you know, activate them before the combo. And you press right plus Mirage Blade button, or in my case D plus right mouse button, and you don't let go of the Mirage Blade button. You don't let go of the right mouse button in my case until it's time to release the Blistering Blades. So you gotta be in your Sin DT, you gotta have the Blistering Blades active, and you gotta have Beowulf equipped. So you start the combo off by using Rising Dragon, and now you let go of the lock on and you press left plus attack button, or in my case A plus left mouse button. And this is a setup that appears in the blue combo and the void combo. So if you want to do a regular Starfall, you just press the attack button or the left mouse button, or you lock on and you press the attack button. So if you lock on and press the attack button, Vergil will simply do a regular Starfall. And the same thing will happen if you lock on and press left plus attack button. So the key here is to basically let go of the lock on after using Rising Dragon, and then you press left plus attack button. That is how you use this inverse Starfall. After this, like as soon as Vergil is done, as soon as he hits the ground, you switch to the Yamato and you use Rising Star. After using Rising Star, you use Aerial Rave 2, or Aerial Rave B, whatever. And after this roulette spin, you basically let go of the lock-on and you use Trick Up, or in my case, I let go of the lock-on and I press E. Now you switch to the Mirage Edge and you use Air Stinger, or well, right plus attack button, or D plus left mouse button. And at this point, you release the Blistering Blades. You finally release the Mirage Blade button, or in my case, I finally release the right mouse button. But you gotta make sure not to release it too early or too late. You need to have perfect timing. And after using Air Stinger and releasing the Blistering Blades, you finally use Starfall. So one mistake that kept happening was I would constantly, miss the Starfall. And I wouldn't be able to graze the enemy, and as a result, they would lose altitude too fast, and they would fall to the ground before I could do anything. So I was like, why is this happening? And I finally figured it out. It has to do with when you release the Blistering Blades. So when you release the Mirage Blade button, or in my case, the right mouse button. So after using Air Stinger, you're not supposed to release the right mouse button or the blistering blades as soon as you start using Air Stinger. You're supposed to wait a little, but you're also not supposed to wait too long because it'll fail then as well. So you really need to know at which point exactly to release the blistering blades, to release the right mouse button in my case. So that's something that I feel is really worth noting because that kept repeating itself, that one mistake. You need to graze the enemy, so don't do it too early. Like, don't do it too early, but don't do it too late. Alright, so after using Starfall with Beowulf, you switch to the Mirage Edge and you use Overdrive. And at this point, you input the Heavy Rain Blades. You can see it here. You can see how the Mirage Blade hits the enemy. That's your indication that you successfully managed to input the Heavy Rain Blades. So you input the Heavy Rain Blades to basically, to freeze the enemy in time, and then you immediately use Air Trick to teleport to the enemy. You switch to the Yamato, and you use Aerial Rave 1. And this will cause the enemy to fall directly onto the overdrive beam. So that beam that's on the ground, that from the overdrive that you did previously, will basically prevent the enemy from hitting the ground. So now that you've done Aerial Rave 1 with the Yamato, you immediately use Trig Down and you use Rising Star with the Yamato, which is right plus holding the attack button. But you gotta hold the attack button while you're using Rising Star for a very long time. Because, well, I'll explain. So you press right and you hold the attack button, you use Rising Star, and now that you're done using Rising Star, you let go of the lock-on and you use Trick Up. And now you immediately let go of the attack button, because, you've been holding the attack button. Now you finally let go of it, and Vergil will use a Judgment Cut, because as you already know, if you hold the attack button for a very long time with the Yamato and you release it, that is a Judgment Cut. And immediately after this, you basically input the Heavy Rain Blades once again, and you switch to the Mirage Edge and you use Air Stinger. But here's the catch. You gotta press right and you gotta hold the attack button while using Air Stinger, because you want to do round trip later. So you press right and you hold the attack button until your Mirage Edge starts glowing, and at that point you release the attack button and Vergil will use round trip. Now you basically use Air Trick to teleport to the enemy, and you use that air taunt, but you gotta use the S rank air taunt. Okay? So you do the S rank air taunt. You know how Vergil has 2 air taunts? So his regular air taunt is just him throwing these 3 Mirage Blades at the enemy, and they launch the enemy into the air. But if your rank is S or higher, and you have the Yamato or the Mirage Edge equipped, then Vergil will do this different air taunt. And you can, like I said, you can only use this air taunt if your style rank is S, and if you have the Mirage Edge or the Yamato equipped, not Beowulf. So, yeah, the way I did this taunt was I selected it in the trainer that I have, because, it has this option to select taunts, but it's very likely that if you're doing this combo, your style rank is going to be S anyway, so I don't really know, but yeah. This will temporarily unfreeze the enemy who is frozen in time by the Heavy Rain Blades. It will unfreeze them enough for them to lose like 2 millimeters of altitude. At this point, not beforehand, only at this point, you switch to Beowulf and you use Starfall again. And when you use Starfall, this Starfall will basically cause the enemy to bounce back in the opposite direction directly onto the round trip. At this point, you switch to the Yamato and you use Rapid Slash. And now you use Judgment Cut End with the Yamato, and you cut everything up while the enemy is trapped on the round trip, which is cutting them up. So that is the end of the blood combo, basically. Alright, so first I'll go over the mistakes that you're not very likely to make. So these were just my personal blunders. So here you can see how I used Lunar Phase instead of Air Stinger because I forgot to switch the Mirage Edge. I had Beowulf equipped instead, so when I press right plus attack button, I used Lunar Phase. Not much to talk about here, it's a stupid mistake. Here you can see how I didn't release the Blistering Blades in time, so the enemy kind of lost a lot of altitude. Here you can see how basically I didn't release round trip because I pressed right plus attack button, but I wasn't holding the attack button. So I did a regular air stinger, but I couldn't convert into round trip. So make sure to hold the attack button while you're using air stinger if you want to use round trip as a follow-up. Here you can see how I did Helmbreaker instead of Starfall because this time I had the Mirage Edge equipped instead of Beowulf. So when I pressed the attack button, Vergil used Helmbreaker instead of Starfall. It's the same command. Moving on, here you can see how I did Rapid Slash instead of Rising Star. So even though I was pressing right and holding the attack button, which is how you use Rising Star, Vergil used Rapid Slash because the enemy was somehow too high up in the air. And as you already know, basically when you press right and you hold the attack button, that is Rising Star. However, if you don't make contact with the enemy, if they're too high up in the air or they're too far away, you'll do a Rapid Slash instead of a Rising Star. So even though you're pressing right and holding the attack button, you can do Rising Star unless you're making contact with the enemy. If they're too high up in the air, you can't do it. So this can happen from time to time. The Overdrive Beam, which is supposed to prevent the enemy from falling to the ground, is keeping them too high up in the air. So I can't use Rising Star. I can't make contact with the enemy. This can happen from time to time, basically. Here you can see how I waited too long before using Trick Up, and as a result, the enemy lost too much altitude and fell to the ground. So I couldn't really, you gotta make sure to not wait, so you just use Trick Up and immediately release the attack button and use the Judgment Cut. So don't wait, don't be like me here. Moving on, here you can see how I used a normal Airton instead of the S-Rank Airton. Really, I've already talked about this, not much more to explain here. You gotta have the S-Rank Airton, and I use the Trainer to make sure that it's always like that. Here you can see how Starfall didn't graze the enemy. We've been over this. This issue occurs when you release the Blistering Blades too early. So like I said, don't release them too early. Don't release them too late either, but definitely don't release them too early. You gotta have that perfect timing. Can't really explain that properly. Here you can see how the Heavy Rain Blades didn't really come out. I guess I made a misinput or something. I'm really not sure. Probably a camera issue. But now, we can finally move on to the biggest and most common mistake with this combo. The Starfall altitude issue. I'm not sure how else to term it. Basically, you know how after using this S-Rank Airton, you're supposed to use Starfall, and this Starfall is supposed to cause the enemy to bounce back to the right and land directly onto the round trip, which will basically start cutting them up. But as you can see here, that doesn't happen. When I attempt to use Starfall, one of two things happens. So either Vergil uses Starfall and the enemy doesn't react at all, he just hits the ground, or they get blown away in the wrong direction, like to the left instead of the right. And I have no idea how to explain this. The way I see it, it has to do with the enemy's altitude. They have to be, they cannot be too high up in the air. They need to be closer to the ground, but at the same time, it's not even that, because sometimes it seems like the altitude is perfect and the enemy is very close to the ground, but it still doesn't work. So look at all of these examples right here. Like, I keep using Starfall, and Vergil either just does it and the enemy doesn't react, or the enemy gets blown away to the left, and I simply cannot explain this. I wish I could, but I seriously cannot. And that's kind of annoying. It's really a bummer. It seems like it's an altitude issue, but I'm not sure how you can, affect this. I'm not sure what you can do about this. The only thing I can recommend is just retrying the combo over and over again until it works. Luckily, this combo in and of itself is pretty easy, and it doesn't really require that many tries, honestly. So, that's kind of like the silver lining. So, yeah, this is just about everything regarding the blood combo. So, yeah.